You know, I was going to open up with that line. It's like, hey, you guys missed me. But considering that I've done that line 5 times now in a row, I'm guessing probably not. And then also, you guys are probably just tired of my shit already. Either way, welcome back, everybody. Today, we have a lovely piece of news here. And that is parameter news here. How absolutely fantastic. We also will be doing the Steel Gladiator Seasons 2 at some point. It is the end of the season, so that's when I start blasting through these levels in 2 seconds, now that all the weekly quests have managed to accumulate. Now, to be fair, I probably won't get started on that until maybe another day or two, and I'll do that on live stream, so you guys will be able to see the whole kit and caboodle. But beyond that, let's go ahead and get started on these plan changes for Parameters for the updated 13.6 test server. My goodness, they are absolutely fantastic at creating succinct titles. But let's go down here directly into the balance changes. My guess is these are all going to be in preparation of the brand new season here. And it does look quite jazzy. Or actually, wait, is it time for the Connect Riders event actually coming back here? I don't know. There's so many events in this game. It's so hard to keep track of. I need like a calendar that has like all 30 events that all mean nothing. But either way, we got the Borah here. Durability has been reduced from essentially 100 points here, but it's 99 points. Why the 1 point is left there, I don't know. That is going to drive someone bonkers, and that someone is me. But okay, and mostly just because it's too effective at the medium power scores, which I could see that to a certain degree. The only downside I could see is that if you're ramming with this, you might be able to get it knocked off more frequently than you would like. But it has a high amount of contact resistance, so probably not too much of an issue. Next thing, Spitfire, damage reduced by 10%. I can see that. Medium range to a little bit higher end range, you can see Spitfire doing exceptionally well. Mostly because it has absolutely fantastic resilience to damage here. So, having that on there might make it a bit more usable or a bit easier to strip in that regard. And of course, counterplay is always that to get behind it, but I feel like that's the case with every car. Next thing, we have the Auto Chill and the Tamia. To be fair, this also pairs with the epic versions of them, which I believe are called the Seal and the Shiver. So essentially what happened is that the one that increases the amount of like shooting that you can do, the time to overheat, that one's been nerfed significantly, especially with regards to shotguns, while the one that increases the cooldown between cooling off periods, so when you overheat and then the heat coming back down, they buff that by an extra 10% here, which I can see why they'd want to do that here. Shotguns with the chill are absolutely fantastic, or any of those other ones that increase your overheat capacity. Those are absolutely fantastic for any short-range weapon, primarily because shotguns, it's basically the first round of a burst that determines whether or not you strip somebody. 2 seals, 2 chills, whatever you need on the thing to actually get your overheat capacity to a super high degree allows a shotgun user to basically strip any weapon as quickly as humanly possible. Now sure, optimally for DPS, you want to get a mixture of the overheating capacity and the cooling capacity, but the way that shotguns are utilized in battle makes it so that it's overheat basically 90% of the way. Same thing with equalizers, but the equalizer's damage is spread so far out due to its shooting time that it doesn't really matter. So good to see on that, especially with the particulars of the shotgun. So maybe those will become nearly as popular with dog builds here. But I feel bad for anyone who just got those relic shotguns, because those things, oof. Next thing here, it looks like the defender here has its durability reduced. Okay. Oh no, sorry. Durability increased. I got that completely backwards. That's always nice to see. A lot of machine guns have very low durability. Defender is pretty much the only thing in the blue category that has decent durability. But even then, 161 points? Okay, again, I'm not sure why the 1 point is just dragging there. But at the same time, too, it does seem a bit interesting how it's actually affected balance at that mid-range power score. Probably not too heavily, considering the defenders, if you stay in the back line and play pretty passively, you can still manage to keep those bad boys on while doing some pretty decent DPS. Next, we got the Therm here, which is basically the downgraded version of the Jewel. And the damage has been increased by 10%. Same thing with the Synthesis here. Apparently, they're not powerful at the same level, which, okay, they have the points to prove those. Considering that I rarely see Synthesis, and I see Therms quite a bit just because they're novel and a bit fun to use, but Synthesis I see very infrequently because really those energy weapons only get good when they have those really nice perks on them. Like those Helioses and those Prometheuses, just, so good. Next we have the Chameleon here. Now the silhouette here actually appears at a lower speed, so in most cases you will actually be able to see this car more frequently. Now the downside is that if you're dealing with a shadowy build that's more or less in the medium speed range, then you shouldn't really see too much of a difference there. This really only applies to super fast chameleon builds, which is theoretically all of them, but there are some medium fast builds that this will not really affect them too much. But they also have the silhouette becoming a distance viewed at roughly around 100 meters instead of 70 meters. So you'll be able to see this a bit further away. So anyone here that's working with things like rockets or any very slow, long reload time weapon, this will definitely be very helpful just so you can get that nice shot out there and get yourself positioned before someone comes in there and rams you up your booty hole. Alright, and the hot rod here. Power score increased by, I don't know, what would that be, 60-ish points? Not too bad here. Considering that the hot rod is really only used in like niche builds. I shouldn't say niche builds, it's pretty much used in every build, but it's only used when you need a little bit of extra speed or the extra capacity, and you don't want to like upgrade your cabin or fuse it, then you just slap on a hot rod, especially when you didn't have any energy left over. Already gone over the seal of the Shiva. Whirlwind here, damage increased by 17%. Woof! That is some big chunk in damage there. I wonder if the Whirlwind will actually become popular. Yeah, no. It's not going to become popular in the absolute slightest here. I mean, the Whirlwind, great weapon at a very long distance, but not every not every map is designed for the Whirlwind. And two, you need a very particular build to actually make the Whirlwind work. You still need a scope to probably use it at a great distance. And then two, a lot of people tend to dodge behind cover. So the Whirlwind seems to have very niche effectiveness, but when it can actually get into that nice broad open space and it can just go full bore, oh damn, does that thing hurt. Especially at a distance where nothing can compete against it, unless you're like a cannon or a scorpion user. Next thing here, we got the Occupant here. The spread format changed from a square to rectangular, closer to the shotgun spread, and the maximum spread is reduced by 25%. That's not too bad. I believe that is a legendary nail gun here, so it's quite nice that it's actually able to do a bit more damage here. I completely forgot they didn't have the square shotgun format, because basically when you're just light tapping it, it is essentially a shotgun. But the reducing that max spread by 25% though will be a big deal, because at close range that means you can tighten up those shots and put it onto a specific piece of armor and just go bore on that. And also that'll allow you to do a lot of damage to weapons pretty easily, especially smaller ones. And now the Thunderbolt here, apparently that's also been too effective here. Man, I feel bad for shotgun builds. You guys are getting shafted left, right, and center. You got the Spitfire there, and now the Thunderbolt. Oof, my dudes. Good luck out there. Well, to be fair, considering that shotgun build, I mean, I feel like 10% is not enough in per se. I feel like it'll only really matter at like the very periphery of builds. I feel like when it comes to most shotgun builds, especially if you do it correctly, you have a lot of clearance when it comes to blowing off weapons. Especially if you're talking about like any sort of machine gun or anything underneath like 200 durability. If I'm talking about cannons, okay, that's where it can get a bit more interesting. But with ramming, you can usually mitigate that factor. Alright, so the Gremlin here, I actually had to look this up here because I completely forget all these weapons all the time. But the Gremlin, upgraded version of the Goblin here. And in order for you to actually activate this extra damage perk that's distributed amongst all the goblins in your build, gremlins, you actually had to ram into something pretty fast too, so generally incentivizing things with like boosters or very light cabins in which you can really get that kinetic energy out here. Reducing that by 50% means essentially you'll be hitting that maximum perk threshold way more frequently. So effectively giving the Gremlin a lot more damage if you were the one to utilize its perk quite frequently. Plus its base damage being increased by 10%. That's really good there. Not to mention that the Gremlin is generally going to be a very high risk, high reward build. So having it so it can actually properly like exploit that niche will definitely help out a lot. Beyond that, we got the nice, lovely epic bootstrap generator here. Looks like its mass has been reduced from 840 to 580, essentially. So a pretty significant decrease in the overall weight. Not enough to make or break builds, but definitely a lot to give more play around room with armor and pieces like that. So that'll help out a lot, especially with those lighter builds, but you shouldn't really be using the heaviest generator on those builds, but it actually kind of reminds me of the excessive mass you would have with Caucasus earlier in the game. Because with Caucasus, if you did not know, back when the game used to have like an extra 10,000 kilogram mass on every cabin, the Caucasus used to weigh like 1,200 or something like that kilograms. I mean, these were chunkin' boys, but they had a lot of HP too. I mean, they were meant to be like old, reliable killers. So, this kind of reminds me of that in a way. Next, we got the Yokai. The bonus projectile explosion radius from the perks increased from 100% to 150. Okay. so it gives a little bit of extra space there to explode, and the perk has been increased from 40% to 50%. So that's good to hear too. Considering that the yokai is still going to be like a very, very niche weapon with how difficult it is to actually hit off that perk, this will at least make it like semi-useful. If it was more like a volley of rockets, I could see it being more useful, because that would actually allow it to like not be hit as often. But alright, cool, we can go with this. Next, the nest damage increased by 15%. Oof. Yeah, I can kind of see that though. Considering the nest is super easy to avoid and super easy to shoot off, I can see why they have to increase the damage on this. Whether that could increase the explosion radius, maybe not. Interesting, and now the quantum, in order to activate its perk, only 4 seconds of no damage taken is needed as opposed to 10, which is a huge difference. I mean, to be fair, in most instances, the quantum cabin, especially when it had that 20-second warm-up time, was borderline useless for its perk, unless you were completely invisible on the other side of the map with like Prometheuses and things like that. So at least now you can actually utilize it. Although I wonder if you're going to actually try to decrease the damage from it, because I believe it was, what, a 20% damage increase on energy weapons? So that's still pretty dang good. Now the claw, the only thing that's really changed about this is the bonus for each weapon or charge per wheel is only 4% instead of 5%. So it'll definitely make it a lot less useful in higher power scores. But honestly, I still don't see claws that much in very high power scores. Like when they're talking around the 9,000 to 10,000 range here, I mean, is it really being used that much? Like, it's sparingly. It is sparingly. Especially considering that I feel like the claws niche is still better helped, or at least if you're going to use those weapons, is better helped with things like hoppers. So, okay. At least that now is, I guess, more in line. I actually wonder how many of these balance changes are because maybe certain weapons are represented more by like an elite population of the Crossout community than like the more average Joe Crossout community. Like, I imagine how many of these balance changes are because like it's popular in clan wars as opposed to being in the regular power scores. They mention power scores in which these are like actions are taken based off of, but I wonder it's still like the other case too. Now the cockpit, again, this thing has been nerfed in many ways here, which I can kind of get why. They reduced its maximum damage but increased the amount you get from each booster, so allowing you to hit that threshold faster, but the threshold being much lower. So which I can see why. Leviathans still were able to utilize this thing to a very strong degree. I mean, a 50 to 40% increase in DPS on any weapon when you're using boosters is stupendously good. Throw a couple of cannons on there, throw like super fast turning machine guns on there, and you can melt some brother truckers there super easily. So I'll have to see why that turns out there. But I don't think Leviathan clan wars are really still even a thing, so I'm not really sure if people are too concerned about this, but who knows. Next we have the Blight here, the perk. Duration has been reduced by 2 seconds here, which, okay, I can see that. The Blight Cabin is absolutely fantastic for any flame weapon builds, and those things are fantastic at popping the explosive bits with inside cars, so I can see why they'd probably want to reduce this just a smidgen. Chameleon here gets basically the same thing as the Chameleon Mark 1, keeping it more in line with everything else. Oh, wow, that Draco mixed with the Blight perk changes as well. Any sort of Draco Blight build right now has been absolutely just kicked in the nuts. Oof, my dudes. Feel bad for you. Ooh, interesting though. A shotgun actually did get a durability increase here. Now, of course, it's for their Hammerfall, the less popular of the shotgun, ever since they nerfed that perk into the ground. So, a bit interesting here to see how that'll actually affect its combat performance here, making it more of a durable weapon. Which, I mean, I guess at that power score they could matter, especially for cannon builds when you start dealing with like tsunamis and typhoons. I can see why you'd probably want to have something a bit more beefy. And then the Nidhogg here, a 15% chunk increase. That is pretty good there. Considering that the Nidhogg, it's really hard because the Nidhogg, because of its reloading mechanic and its delay between each shot, is not as effective and is a lot more risky than a traditional shotgun. It's still not going to be as popular, but with this and a Cerberus cannon and a reload canister, I can see this thing being very popular. And here for the Harvester, it looks like the counterplay, quote-unquote, for this has been improved by reducing its durability and by reducing its mass there quite significantly too. So lighter builds will have more parts for armor, but their overall damage dealer is going to be significantly weaker here. So it's going to be kind of an interesting counterplay. But considering that I feel that most borers or melee weapons got shot off because the frame it was attached to blew off is more of the causal issue than the actual durability of the weapon itself. But maybe that might change here with this pretty significant reduction in durability. So just considering that you have to remember Harvester is going to be somewhere in that medium range to higher range power scores here. Beyond that, the Still Wind here, the damage is being increased by 17%. I guess same in line with the Whirlwind. But the Fortune damage has been increased by 10%. So still not too bad. It's funny because I remember the Fortune being actually pretty dang popular for a long time. But I guess there was a nerf to that was probably overdone, it seems. But interesting enough. I always love playing the Fortune, so it always is kind of nice to see some weapons come back into more of the lexicon here. Considering this historically has been a pretty underpowered weapon, but alright then. Beyond that, now we have just that little post about the test of, oh boy. Yeah, if you guys actually want to go ahead and actually test this, I'll leave a link down below. Click the links to follow it. It's literally a 2-second thing to download. Not too bad. Make sure to install it on another hard drive because it will overwrite your base game for whatever reason. Beyond that, we also have this nice lovely post here about upcoming parts from the brand new update here, which considering that the nature of these parts looks pretty dang futuristic, I'm either guessing it's going to be like a Dawn's Children or it's going to be a Founders update. Something space and science related, definitely. So those two factions are like the most prominent things coming to mind. And they do look quite jazzy if I had to do say so myself. So what do we actually got here? A brand new Pulse Cabin here. An epic weapon which the firing mechanics are in many ways similar to that of the well-known Scorpion, but some special features too. The new Pulse Cannon's projectiles deal less damage, you cannot penetrate enemy armor, but their flight speed is considerably higher at long range. Needs a time to preemptive aiming, but the projectile speed would be so high it'll require some getting used to. So interesting. That and this thing's going to have two different firing modes. A standard mode, in which the press the fire key releases an instant shot that deals default damage, or one where you can charge up and then release, which also deals a small amount of damage to your own car. So a bit interesting of a weapon here. This will definitely be great if you can directly hit weapons or other critical parts. This thing will be a huge absolute benefit to that. Now, a downside, any car with sort of like skirt armor or layers of armor, I could see this pulse cannon here being, I don't want to say borderline useless, but it would definitely have very, very limited usefulness. But definitely interesting to see how this will actually turn out in the end. I imagine they're probably going to have to forcefully put on some penetration. Maybe not as deep as a cannon or whatever, but definitely to go through 2 armor plates. Next here we have the Heaven Cabin here, which actually, oddly enough, still kind of looks like those old box Chevy trucks from like the 70s, 80s. Definitely kind of gives me those vibes right now. It looks really cool. So this will be the MRAC engine. Parameters are quite standard for epic heavy cabins with slightly higher maximum speed and lower weight limit. So I'm kind of curious if that means it's going to be faster than something like the Icebox cabin or the Cerberus. But apparently is that whenever it takes damage, its damage resistance will increase every time, up to a maximum of 3 times. Although I'm kind of curious as to like, what percentage is that? Is that a 10% damage resistant? Is that a 90% damage resistance? Because that'll make or break whether or not this is a good cabin. But at the same time too, I feel that for most people, cabin damage is only a concern if you're utilizing something like cannons. If you're using something like machine guns, Caucasus, drones, anything like that, then the damage resistance perk is not terribly useful. Especially considering that niche of like quote-unquote damage resistance, I feel is probably going to be fulfilled with all sorts of other cabins. Like the Cohort cabin, that thing is absolutely fantastic at reducing damage resistance, and it's applied to the whole team and to everything on the car. So I'm not sure if it's actually going to be able to do a whole lot in that regard. But we'll see. I definitely do love the aesthetics though, and that's going to be really cool. If they actually keep it, that is. Beyond that, they also have a couple of bullet points here. Completely reworked the marker system here, which, okay, I guess that might be useful for some people, but considering that the majority of people just spam their G key and it's just like, great. Yeah, I don't think anyone's really going to be doing terribly much communication in that regard. If you put in voice chat, sure, there'll be a lot of racism here, but at least now we can actually talk to the people. Next, we're going to try to balance AI opponents in raids, which, out of all things, raids are not really too hard because of the AI opponents, unless they're going to make it harder, I suppose. But the big thing with the raids is that they're quite samey. There hasn't been any sort of like improvement on the modes or the map variety there in a long time. So people playing raids consistently are probably consistently bored at this point, but honestly, I feel like I bring that up every single patch, and still nothing has really happened. And then beyond that, we'll also have another balance changes for various parts. Wow, I never would have guessed, considering we just read that post. But, alright, I think that's going to be everything here with the news. What do you guys think about the brand new parts and the balancing changes here? Any of your highlights here that you liked? We'll go ahead and leave them down below. We'll discuss them, see how it goes. but I'm pretty interested to see in the changes in the coolers and shotguns. Will you actually see a pretty sharp decline in the amount of dog builds, especially in the higher end power scores? Who really knows? But the changes to the Shiver and the Chill into like those category of enhancements, I wonder how that actually changed the overall balance in this game. If it'll favor more reload based weapons. I can see that tacitly favoring them, but who knows? Who knows? Let me know what you guys think down below. Other than that, guys, I want to thank you all for joining me. If you had fun, follow whatever platform is your favorite. We do have that Twitch, YouTube down below, as well as Twitter and Discord if you want to get notified whenever we go live, as well as just join the community. Other than that, guys, I am out of here. Bye.